Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday. I'm so happy to be back on Facebook. I feel like we have not been together in a while. So welcome to our workshop today. I hope everyone has had a fantastic week and a very happy Thanksgiving. And I hope that you're planning a very, very special Christmas for you and your family and your staff in this different world that we're living in right now. So yes, it's going to be fun. Today, believe it or not, I'm kind of super excited about our topic today and the material that I've put together for you. Today we're going to talk about the most commonly cited minimum standards and the most misunderstood minimum standards that we have in our book. I've got about 14 standards that we're going to talk about in the most commonly cited, and then I've got a little over 20 standards that we're going to talk about with the most misunderstood. So if you have a copy of your minimum standards booklet in front of you, that would be helpful. However, it's not necessary. If you don't have a copy of your standards, no worries. You can just listen and take notes and ask questions as we go along. So I've got to give a disclaimer before we get started on our material today. We're going to talk about what is in black and white, what is actually in the standards, and then talk about some suggestions and some tips on how to keep you in compliance. I understand that around the state, from time to time, we have local licensing reps that may have different interpretations and different guidance on some of the standards. And so we're not going to focus on that today, all right? Today we're going to focus on what is right here in black and white. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I see lots of people joining us today, so that is super exciting. I'm so happy that all of you are here. So the Texas Department of Health and Human Services, and prior to us being under Health and Human Services, the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, they issue reports every year, and in their annual reports, they will document the top 10 cited items in the standards each year. So basically, I have pulled 2017, 2018, and 2019 data, and that's what we're going to go over in the first part of today's webinar. What are the top cited items for the last 3 years? Now, for those of you that have never participated in one of my Facebook Live events, let me tell you really quickly how this works. We are live right now. You have the opportunity to interact with me, so that makes this an instructor-led training if you are live right now. If you're watching the recorded video, then that would be self-instructional. But if you're live with me right now, it is instructor-led, and I see lots of you making comments right now. Hello to you all. At the end of today's workshop, there will be a link posted on Facebook that you will click on, and you can complete an online worksheet to receive 3 hours of instructor-led training. And there is a $15 fee for 3 hours of training. So that link will be made available at the end of the workshop. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So yes, we are going to look at the top cited items from 2017, 2018, and 2019. It's going to be really interesting to see what this looks like in 2020, we might talk about that as we go along. Let me ask you a question before we get started. Those of you that are with us, what do you think we're going to talk about today? What standard do you think is in the top 10 list of most cited items? If y'all want to type that into your chat screen, I would love to see what you are predicting that we're going to talk about today. So what do you think is one of the most cited items in the book? Type that into your chat and let's see what you have to say right there. So yeah, everyone's saying good morning right now. So All right, so yes. Okay, well, let's go ahead and we'll start going through our list and see if you kind of got these right there. All right, so like I said, there's basically 14 standards oh yes, we got some coming in now. Playground safety is what Jennifer is predicting. Christy is saying children's records is something that she is predicting we'll talk about. Lack of supervision and ratios is what Paula is saying out here. Labeling bottles and cups, yep, ratios again I see coming up. Employee training, Caitlin says. Y'all know that one kind of hurts because, you know, that's what I'm all about, is providing you your professional development. But we'll see if that shows up in the list right here. Jana is saying paperwork and forms, employee records, documentation, Cecilia is predicting, and we got some more supervision coming in. All right, well, let's see. Now, I say we're going to go over the top 10 most cited items in the standards. I've got 14 that I'm going to share with you because many of them show up, and the same standard shows up all 3 years. There's a couple of them that are unique or only shows up 1 or 2 years, but I'll kind of tell you about that. And I'm going to go backwards, okay? So y'all remember David Letterman? He used to do his top 10 list, and he would start at 10 and go to number 1. So that's how we're going to do this today. I'm going to go backwards, and we're going to lead up to the number 1 cited item in the book. So here we go. And definitely, if you have any questions or comments throughout the Facebook Live, make sure that you type that in right there. So the first standard that we are going to talk about is employee training. All right, so someone had predicted that right there. 746-1309, all right? And this is A, what areas of training must my annual training for caregivers cover? And A says the 24 clock hours of annual training must be relevant to the age of the children for whom the caregiver provides care. This was 531 programs were cited for this in 2018. So it was number 10 on the list in 2018. And what people are being cited for is that the training that the caregiver is receiving is not relevant to their assignment, all right? So very, very important that when you're making provisions for training for your employees, that the training that they are receiving is relevant to the age group that they're working with, all right? And that's what 531 people were cited for in 2018. Now, one thing that you want to look at right here, of course, I 100% agree that the training that you're providing for your caregivers, it does need to be specific to the age group that they're working with. But I know a lot of you, your employees, work with several different age groups. So the recommendation that I always make right here is that in your job descriptions, even though it may be a pre-K teacher job description, somewhere in that job description you need to say that all employees are cross-trained to support other classrooms when needed. All right, make sure that's in your job descriptions. That way, if you do send a pre-K teacher to a training on infant toddler brain development, you're going to be able to count that, all right, because that employee is being cross-trained to support other classrooms, all right? If you're not, moving teachers around and that teacher only stays in that one classroom and never supports another classroom, another age group, then, absolutely you want to make sure that the training is relevant to the age group that they're working with, all right? So that, like I said, was number 10 in 2018. 531 programs were cited for the training that your caregivers are receiving not being relevant to the age group that they are working with. All right. The next one also has to do with the training that you're providing for your caregivers. And this one is 746-1309F, as in Frank, all right? And this was number 9 in 2018. 581 programs were cited for this right here. And F as in Frank is the one where it says the remaining annual training hours must be in one or more of the following topics. Care for children with special needs, health or nutrition, safety, risk management, identifying ill children. But number 7 is the big one, professional development. Number 8 is any topic relevant to the age group that the caregiver is assigned to, and etc. So this one kind of surprised me that it was one of the most commonly cited items because, I mean, anything should fall into that professional development or topic relevant to the age group. What I'm guessing is happening right here is that the certificates of completion that are being provided to licensing are not specific enough to include this information. So when you're receiving your training certificates, make sure that the core competency areas, the topic is listed on there so that you can show that it falls into this category of F. All right. I got a question from Bridget. She's asking, do you apply college credits to train when teachers are attending college? Can you use their college credits towards training hours? Yes, you can, and that is mentioned in the Child Care Minimum Standards, as long as the college course is related to child development. All right. So any of your early education child development courses, you can count those towards training hours. Now your general education, so their math class, their English class, their history, you can't count any of that, all right? But the early childhood or child development, that you can, all right? So you can include that. So that was a good question right there. Same thing with if you have teachers that are working towards their CDA. The 120 hours of training that is required to apply for your CDA, you can use those hours towards your annual training hours too. So you get to double dip into those CDA hours. That's kind of nice, all right? The problem with that, I don't want to get too far off topic right here. The problem with double dipping into your CDA coursework is you then get into a wage and hour issue. Because under the Texas payday law, you must pay for all hours spent in meetings and trainings. However, you don't have to pay for time spent earning a credential or a certification. There's a difference between the two. Well, when you have someone working towards their CDA, that 120 hours is going towards their credential, so you don't have to pay for that time. But if you're using that to satisfy your annual training requirements, then you're moving it into the other bucket of time spent in meetings and trainings. So that's where you go into a wage and hour issue. So just be careful with that, all right? I got a question. What should be included on the training certificate? It should include the participant's name, the date, the number of hours of training, the topic that is included, how the trainer meets the trainer qualifications. And those of you that are part of Texas Rising Star or nationally accredited, I recommend that core competency areas be included on your training certificate. And you'll notice that all of the training certificates that I issue include all of this information. All right, let's move on. So the next most commonly cited item that we see in our programs actually is not part of the Child Care Minimum Standards. It's part of the 745 rules, which is the Texas Administrative Code. We're going to actually see this a few times today, the Texas Administrative Code. And of course, this is going to relate to, y'all predicted it, criminal background checks. all right? And in this case, it is 745-625B, all right? This was, actually, we're going to talk about that one later, sorry. 745-626A, all right? And this was number 10 in 2017. And this was people that were cited for having employees counted in child-staff ratio having direct access to children before they did their criminal background check. So y'all know that that is a big-time no-no. You cannot place them in child-staff ratio or with direct care of children until you have that eligibility letter. And y'all also know that any deficiency related to a criminal background check, you're going to be fined for that. So not only is it a deficiency, but you're going to receive an administrative penalty as well. All right. And like I said, we're going to see the 745 standards pop up in our list a few times. So several of you have contributed money to the state of Texas with your background check deficiencies. All right. So this was 2017. So this was prior to the background check changes that we had in 2019. I thought that was surprising right there. But again, lots of people being cited for allowing the caregivers to be in a classroom before the criminal background checks came back then. All right. Cameron is talking about fines and penalties such as cannot train your own staff. No, an administrative penalty, there are certain deficiencies that you will be fined an administrative penalty. Training your own staff doesn't fall into that category. A director who is in good standing with child care licensing, you can train your own staff as long as, like I said, you're not on corrective action or you've been given that restriction from child care licensing. But that's not something that falls into an administrative penalty category. All right. Let me go ahead, since we're on the topic of criminal background checks, let me go ahead and tell y'all about 745-625B, all right? And once again, this is allowing employees to have direct access to children and be counted in child staff ratio before you have the criminal background check in your possession. So this was the #1 deficiency in 2018. 1,146 programs were cited for this in 2018. It was #2 in 2017. All right. Now, I do wanted to point out, and I highlighted this, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned this. It does say, this is talking about people that have previously worked at another program and have already been fingerprinted, all right, then you're going to get the eligibility letter that they can be in the classroom. People that have not previously worked in a program or there has been a lapse in their employment are subject to a fingerprint or a new fingerprint. All right, and that's where people are getting cited right there. All right, so yeah, and we're going to talk about this one more time coming up. All right, the next most commonly cited item that we see in our minimum standards, we're going to go right back to training. Come on, folks. Y'all know that's my specialty right here. Use me, abuse me, okay? But y'all keep getting cited for not having the adequate training. Come on, let's work with each other, all right? This is 746-1309 as in elephant, all right? And this was the #10 cited item in 2019. There were 479 programs cited for this in 2019. This one is a tricky one, and I understand why so many people are being cited for this one. But E as an elephant is the standard that says, while there are no clock hour requirements for the topic in this subsection, the annual training hours must also include training on the following topics. So every year, your employees must have training on emergency preparedness, preventing and controlling the spread of communicable diseases, including immunizations, administering medication, preventing and responding to emergencies due to food allergies, understanding your building premises, and handling, storing, and disposing of hazardous waste. All right? All 6 of those topics your employees have to be trained on every single year. Now, where I think people are making the mistake, all right, and I wish licensing would reword this, because I think it's the wording that is messing people up. While there are no clock hour requirements for the topic in this subsection, the annual training must also include training on the following topics. And it's that while there are no clock hour requirements for the topics below, I think that sentence is what's messing people up. All right. Basically, you have to make sure that somewhere in your 24 hours of annual training, those 6 topics are covered. It doesn't matter how long it takes. That's what they're trying to say. It doesn't matter how long, how many hours you spend on this, just somewhere in your 24 hours, those 6 topics have to be covered, all right? But I think it's that first part of the sentence that is messing everybody up right there, all right? So yeah, so I see Denise is saying that she has a packet that covers all of that, that is given to the employees every year. Good job. And I have that available on my website for you as well. All right, so all of these topics are on my website available to you to support your staff. And it's also included in our child care pre-service and staff orientation guide that is for sale on our website. So you can put those packets together, get those 6 hours done every year, all right, and then not get cited, all right. So, and I've been teaching director credential all week, and we actually had a pretty big conversation on this for some reason this week, but tracking your training hours and making sure that you're meeting the expectations. I personally like the document that is on Child Care Licensing's website that you can download to help you track your training hours and ensure that you're getting all of the required topics. So I haven't made anything, because I think what they have is perfectly acceptable. It's pretty good, all right? But if you want to, create a spreadsheet or put a system in place, whatever works best for you, all right? Let's see, I'm just reading some of the comments that are coming in right there. A lot of you just do it automatically at the beginning of the year. I think that's great. You do it as part of your in-service training at the beginning of the school year. Fantastic idea right there for you as well. All right, so moving on. Make sure that you're getting those 6 topics. Oh, and by the way, you might see this question on your worksheet at the end of training today. One of the worksheet questions might be, what are the 6 topics that people are getting cited for under 746.1309E, all right? 746.1309E. And again, it's the emergency preparedness, preventing and controlling the spread of diseases, administering medication, food allergies, building premises, handling, storing, and disposing of hazardous waste. All right? There you go. What is the form number? I don't know off the top of my head, but if you just go to licensing's website and look at their documents, it should be pretty easy to identify which one is that document, but it's pretty good. All right, moving on. The next most commonly cited standard that we see over the last 3 years, this was number 9 in 2019. 498 programs were cited for 746-603, number 4. Someone had said children's records earlier. There you go, you got it. And 746-603, number 4, is immunizations. All right, making sure that you're keeping up with your immunizations and that all children are current on their immunizations. Okay, so and I get it. Again, this is a hard task to be able to keep track with, making sure that those kids are up to date. Now, a couple of suggestions I have on this one. I always recommend that in your parent handbook, you put in there that it is still the parent's responsibility to keep track of their children's immunizations and to ensure that they are current. Sometimes when we tell parents, hey, your child is due for a vaccine or an immunization, they're like, and you say, you can't come back until you have it, or you have until Friday to get this done. The parent's like, why are you just now telling me this? Hey, you're the parent. You still need to keep up with this, all right? Make sure that you have that in your handbook. However, there's a lot of software programs that will help you track your children's immunizations. ProCare has a great system that you can run weekly or monthly reports that will tell you when someone is coming due. There's a lot of other software packages that will help you track that, all right? But whoever is doing your administration, your clerical duties in your program, make sure that this is in their job description. Make sure that you have it, monthly, that you're checking those immunizations, all right? We've been teased for years now, probably 10 years now. We have been teased with the rumor that eventually healthcare professionals will be required to enter this data into a database that will be accessible to regulatory agencies, and at some point in time we won't have to keep track of this. But again, we've had that rumor floating around for, gosh, it seems like 10 years now, that we would eventually not be required to do this, but it hasn't happened yet. So send well wishes to them that we get this going. All right. I got a question about how often should you update the actual admissions form. Basically, licensing just says that you must have a system or process in place for updating the form as needed. That's what licensing says. So there is no regulation on getting a brand new form or an updated form. They just say you have to have a system in place for parents to update information. I recommend, what I like to do is, have the parents fill out a new admissions form every year. That's what I like. My whole thought behind this is that between, the parents, mom and dad, the emergency contacts, the authorized pickups, over the course of a year, someone's probably changed jobs, changed phone numbers, changed cell phone numbers, changed address, especially these days with how much people, move around. I just think it's a good idea to get an updated form every year. What licensing says, it's just you have to have a system in place to be able to update this information as needed. All right? All right, so moving on right here. The next most commonly cited item also has to do with children's records, all right? And this is 746-603-3. And this is the statement of a child's health from a healthcare professional. So the health statement. This was number 8 in 2017, and it was also number 8 in 2019. So in 2019, 505 programs were cited for you not having a health statement signed by the healthcare professional within 1 year. All right. Let's talk about this one right here, because I've got a couple of things to say about this one. Y'all know on the health statement, a health statement is a document stating that the child has been seen by a healthcare professional and is healthy enough to participate in the group program. It goes on to say that this has to be signed by the healthcare professional, or you can have a notarized affidavit stating that it conflicts with a belief or conviction, or it says that it can be signed by the parent giving the name, address, and phone number of the healthcare professional, which is then followed by a signature from the healthcare professional within 12 months of enrollment. All right. I always recommend to y'all to put a big X on that number 3. All right. Having the parent sign it and then getting the signature within 12 months. All right. You always have a right to exceed anything in the minimum standards. My recommendation to you is get the signature from the healthcare professional upon enrollment, and then you're done. All right? You don't have to worry about this. I believe the reason why 505 programs were cited for this in 2019 is because you allow the parent to sign and give the name, address, and phone number of the healthcare professional, and then you don't ever get that signature within 12 months. All right? You forget about it, it falls off your radar, and boom, you're out of compliance. So get the signature up front, you're done. You're done. All right? So there you go. One recommendation that I always have for you is to put in your parent policies that a child is not allowed to start in your program until all enrollment paperwork is turned in and completed, period. We have that policy in our handbook, and we stick to it, all right? That way if that parent comes in and says, well, I don't have the health statement signed by the healthcare professional, we're going to the doctor on Thursday, my response is, we'll see you on Friday, all right? But I strongly recommend the child does not start until all enrollment paperwork is turned in and completed. Tip for me, getting a deficiency for records is a big trigger, all right? I don't think there should be any reason why we should get a deficiency for records. That should be one of the easiest things we do, all right? The child simply does not start until all enrollment paperwork is turned in and completed. Done, all right? We got enough on our plate. We have enough to worry about. Having to deal with records and getting those updated and chasing documents, we don't got time for that. All right, so keep it simple. It's completed before they come in. All right. So the next most commonly cited item that we have in our minimum standards booklet, and I believe I saw someone at the beginning predict this one. And this one has shown up on the top 10 list every year for the last 3 years. It was number 7 in 2017. It was number 6 in 2018. 698 programs were cited for this in 2018. And it was number 7 in 2019. 570 programs were cited for this standard in 2019. This one is 746 5101. 5101. Must my child care center have an annual fire inspection? Someone called that earlier, the fire inspection. Your child care center must have a fire inspection before they issue a permit, and it must be done every 12 months. Okay, so you have to have an annual fire inspection. So, you know, over 1,100 programs were cited over the last 2 years for not having that annual fire inspection. All right. You know, this one is one that you have to schedule. In most areas, this doesn't automatically happen. You have to call and schedule your fire inspection. And, you know, people just miss it and they allow it to expire, and boom, 1,100 people are cited for it. All right. So make sure that you've got a good system in place. The way we do it is, you know, we put together a compliance binder. So when you look in the minimum standards on the required records, we kind of use that as a table of contents. Create yourself a compliance binder, and all of those required documents, you put a copy of them in your compliance binder. So I like to get a nice big binder with page protectors. And then you have all of your documents in order that they are in the book, and you've got that in there. And I like to put, you know, like a little address label in the bottom right hand corner, you know, 746-5101 annual fire inspection. All right, and here's your copy. And then also put on there, the actual fire inspection is located on the parent communication board in the front lobby or wherever it is in your world. And we use that compliance binder not only so that when licensing comes in to check our records, instead of you having to chase documents all morning, you just hand them the binder, boom, here's everything they need. But also, again, whoever is responsible for your clerical work, we call it our Director of Administration in our world, but at least once a month, that person, it's part of their job duties to flip through every page of the compliance binder, check the dates, see if there's any inspections coming up, make sure you got that fire drill, you got that severe weather drill, you know, all of that stuff right there. All right, and that is the role of the administration person. That seems to work really well. The other recommendation that I have to help you with this right here is try to manipulate it where you have all of your inspections due in the same month, if possible. All right, so that way you don't have to worry about fire inspection is due in February, gas inspection is in November, health inspection is in April. You know, try to manipulate it where everything is in 1 month. That makes it a lot easier as well. Now, technically, if you opened your program and you had all of these inspections done prior to opening, they should all be around the same area of time, all right? You know, but I think over the course of time, where you have fallen behind or you've done something early, the months have scattered out, and that's where we see some discrepancies right there, all right? So I see a comment, Stephanie is saying that y'all don't have a fire marshal anymore, all right? So licensing is saying to have something from the city stating that. What we're really seeing, the big trend that we see around the state is that most of your fire marshals or fire departments will not do your fire inspections anymore. They are now requiring you to use an outside contractor to do this, and then you submit that. All right, that's the biggest trend that we're seeing. Now, the big difference right here is that when you have to use an outside contractor, they charge you money, and they're usually pretty expensive right there. You know, and not only that, but this contractor that's doing your fire inspection, you know, they also repair fire systems, so they like to find things wrong, so then they can charge you to fix it. All right, But getting back on track, 746, 5101A has been in the top 10 list every year for the last 3 years. Let's put a big focus on that fire inspection and get that off of the top 10 list. All right. Okay, moving on to our most commonly cited standards. We're going back to record keeping again. And this one, 746-605, number 6. And that is the emergency contact on the enrollment form. All right. This was the number 4 deficiency in 2017 and the number 6 deficiency in 2019. So 578 programs were cited for this in 2019. Somehow we did good in 2018. It wasn't on the list in 2018, but 2017 and 2019, this was in the top 10. The emergency contact, all right? So it says that the name, address, and telephone number of another responsible individual, friend, or relative who should be contacted in an emergency when the parent cannot be reached, all right? The reason why, over 500 people were cited for this in 2019, it's the address of the emergency contact that is missing. That's why people are getting cited. When parents are filling out the enrollment forms, they are leaving the address blank, okay? Or what I have seen is that, they're filling out the enrollment form and under emergency contact where it asks for the address, they just put Dallas, and you're getting cited for that. All right, 578 programs were cited for it in 2019. So when you're accepting enrollment paperwork, make sure that the name, address, and telephone number of the emergency contact is included. Let me tell you the reason why this is important. And sometimes when you understand the reason why we have a particular standard, people are more willing to comply when they understand the reason. And especially if you have a parent that's being very hesitant about this, when you explain the reason, they're more willing to comply. The reason why the name, address, and telephone number is so important, in the event that while the child is in your care, both parents die, okay, then the state of Texas has to have a designated person to be able to take that child to, all right, in the event that both parents die while the child is in your care. Otherwise, the child goes into state custody, all right, and we don't want that to happen. So, that's the reason why the name, address, and telephone number is so important. The name and phone number makes sense. It's the address that we've got to get people to understand. Now, I'm sure that when you explain this to your parents, they're probably going to say, oh, that's not going to happen. Both parents aren't going to die while the kid is in care. Well, you don't know that. I mean, goodness, look at 2020. It's been a crazy year. We've had so much chaos and drama this year. You just don't know that. So when you explain to the parents, there you go. Now, one more thing that I want to point out under 746-605, number 6, is that you may notice that it says name, address, and telephone number of another responsible individual. Okay, singular, all right? As far as licensing is concerned, you only need one, all right? One emergency contact is all licensing requires. A lot of us ask for more. All right, so in my programs, we ask for 3 emergency contacts. And not only do I ask for 3, but I also ask for 3 local emergency contacts is how we have it worded. And remember, you always have a right to exceed anything in this book. All right. And the reason why I do that is because if I have a significant event and I cannot get a hold of the parent, grandma in Florida does me no good. All right. I need someone that is local and is willing and able to assist when I can't get a hold of mom and dad. All right. Now I had a family one time that we enrolled in our program from Ohio, and dad was transferred with his job down to Texas from Ohio, and they actually came and toured our program and enrolled their children before they even moved here. Well, when I gave them the enrollment paperwork and I said, hey, I need 3 local emergency contacts, they were like, we don't know anybody. We're just moving to Texas. We know nobody here. So my recommendation to dad was, put down your new supervisor, your HR rep, and your real estate agent. All right. Those are 3 people that typically can get a hold of you no matter where you're at. So that's what I recommend. And then once you move down here and you make friends and you meet your neighbors, then you can change this anytime you want. But that was my recommendation, and that's actually what they did. And then they changed it once they made friends. All right. But I think the supervisor and the HR person is a good recommendation. They can usually get a hold of that parent no matter where they're at. All right. Michelle's asking a question: how do we handle a parent who can't provide anyone besides themselves? All right. We actually had this when we were opening a new school about 3 years ago. We had this mom and dad come to enroll their child, and they left the entire emergency contact section blank. We said, hey, we need emergency contacts, name, address, telephone number. We don't know anybody. Okay, we don't have any friends or family here. So I said, hey, put down your supervisor, put down your HR person. I'm self-employed. Okay, so I'm like, dude, you got to come up with somebody. You got to know someone, But every suggestion I gave them, they tossed out. And it finally got to the point where I'm like, well, unfortunately, you can't start here. You cannot enroll your child here until you can come up with someone that you can put down as an emergency contact. So you either go make a friend or you don't get to come here. It was basically the response that we had to give them. All right. So, that hopefully will answer Michelle's question right there. If they can't provide anyone but themselves, then they don't get to come here. All right. You don't enroll them. All right. Very good. Moving on. This one makes me sad, everyone. But this is another standard that was in the top 10 list all 3 years. In 2017, it was number 9. In 2018, it was number 7. 669 programs were cited for this in 2018. And it was number 5 in 2019. 685 programs were cited for this one in 2019. And y'all predicted it, child staff ratios. All right. So child staff ratios, we've got over 1,300 programs that have been cited for child staff ratios in the last 2 years. All right. So let's talk about ways that you can ensure that your classrooms are staying in ratio. My first suggestion to you is that this is not just the job of the director, all right? Remember, in the child care minimum standards, there are 2 different standards. This is mentioned 2 different times in the standards that your employees must know and comply with the minimum standards. So not just the director's responsibilities. All right, so let's take this responsibility of staying in child-staff ratio and put it back on the employees too, all right? So we need to have a good process in place that when you have a classroom that is reaching capacity or they're reaching that ratio, that the employee notifies the director before they're out of ratio, not after, all right? So, that's my tip right there. My other suggestion always is doing half-hour ratio checks. And I've got a document on my website, timthetrainer.com. You can go to documents and download it, but a half-hour ratio check form where every 30 minutes or as often as possible, the director is walking around the program, going into the classroom, and you're documenting how many children, how many employees. There's several reasons why I love this process, and it's actually going to be applicable to a few other conversations that we're going to have here in just a little bit. But number one, it helps you ensure that you're staying in ratio. It gives you staffing patterns. So after you've been doing this for a while, you start collecting data and you know how many people to staff, at certain times during the day. So it's giving you those staffing patterns. But it's also keeping you present so that the director is in the classroom, you are aware of what's going on, you're supervising your staff, and in the event that you are investigated for staff supervision or you have a significant event and licensing is questioning staff supervision, your half-hour ratio checks is a very good document to prove to licensing that you are supervising your staff. You're going in there, all right? So, and then also, I say this all the time, the enemy to leadership is busyness and stress. And we get busy in our programs and we tend to forget about the most important thing, which is our classrooms. So I like the half-hour ratio check because it's forcing a member of management to go in and out of those classrooms, every 30 minutes or as often as possible. All right, very good. The other important part of the half-hour ratio check is that you need to be able to clearly say exactly how many children, how many adults are in your building at any point in time. In the event of a significant event, okay, so you have a tornado hit your program, a fire breaks out in your program, you have an intruder that comes into your program. When the emergency personnel shows up, you need to be able to tell them exactly how many humans were in your program, in your building, when the significant event happened. If I have a tornado hit my program and the emergency personnel shows up and they say how many people were in the building, well, I think there was about 100 and there was really 102, that's 2 people they're not looking for, all right? So very important that you have a system in place where you know exactly how many humans are in your building at any point in time. And the way I do it is, whenever I'm in a program, operating a program, I do my half-hour ratio checks, but then I am like sticky note king. I use a lot of sticky notes, and so I will sit there and do tick marks, as children are coming in, or in the afternoon as children are going home, and that way, even in between my 30 minutes, I know exactly how many kids that we've got with my little tick marks. All right, so I'm surprised no one has made this comment on the chat screen yet. But I believe that you have good intentions on keeping your program in ratio, and you've got every intention on doing this. The 13 programs that have been cited over the last 2 years, I'm going to guess that the reason why they were cited was due to staffing issues. That employees called in sick or failed to report to work, or employees were late for their shift, and this created a situation where you were out of ratio. All right. You know, this is where we need to have some tough conversations with our employees about the commitment to their job and how important them being present when assigned, that's very important so that you can maintain compliance. And then having a backup plan whenever that doesn't happen. I actually have a pre-recorded webinar. It was one of these workshops that we did that's on my website on what happens when employees call in sick. So if you haven't watched that video yet, I recommend it. You can find it on my website, timthetrainer.com, and go to online trainings, and you can just scroll down. They're in alphabetical order, and you can see that one. I mainly talk about the social and emotional impact that a caregiver failing to report to work has on the children, but we also talk about the operational impact that has, and how one employee not showing up for work, how many different people it affects in the program, because then you have to pull someone else out of their classroom, you know, which then is affecting that group of children, and it just snowballs from there. All right. Ricky, if you're not finding that document on my website, when we get done with today's workshop, I will double check and make sure that it's still there, and I didn't remove it. But if it's not there, I will add it, the most current version that we're using. I will add it at the end of the workshop. So thank you for pointing that out. I will double check on that once we are done with today's workshop. All right, very good. So I see Amber is saying that they use an Excel spreadsheet to help track this right here. And of course, once again, there are lots of software programs and apps that will help you track your ratios. ProCare is really awesome on the dashboard. As people are signing in and out, it will highlight red whenever you're out of ratio. So that's pretty awesome with ProCare. You have to set your configurations, but it's really pretty easy to do. But there's a lot of the different technology that will help you in this area. Okay, but like I said, you can have all this wonderful technology, you can have all this wonderful processes, but if people don't come to work, that's what's creating the problem. All right, there you go. I see someone is saying that they've lost their video. I would just refresh your browser and it should pop right back up on Facebook. All right. Next, most commonly cited standard that we have, and this is another one that has been in the in the top 10 list for the last 3 years. This was number 5 in 2017. Dropped down to number 8 in 2018. There were 658 programs cited for this standard in 2018. Went back to number 5 in 2019. There was actually a tie in 2019 for number 5. 685 programs were cited for this in 2019. I did a whole Saturday workshop on this last year. This was my topic last year on Saturday. But 746-1201 number 1. All right, 746-1201 number 1. What general responsibilities do my child care center employees have? And number 1 says, demonstrate competency, good judgment, and self-control in the presence of children and when performing assigned responsibilities. All right? And I think the last part of that sentence is probably the most important. All right? That you have to demonstrate competency, have good judgment, and maintain self-control when performing assigned duties. All right, so not just in the presence of children, but when performing those assigned duties right there. All right, so like I said, I did a whole Saturday workshop on this last year. I've got it scheduled to do again in 2021. Especially after I saw the data, and again, over 1,300 programs were cited for this, over the last 2 years. And this is a tough one, and especially being the leader of your program, you've got to be very conscious and aware of your employees' emotional state. And when we talk about demonstrating competency, do you have the mental ability to make a good decision? All right, or are your employees in a good mental state to where they can make good decisions and maintain self-control? All right, that's something that when you're doing your half-hour ratio checks and you're going in and out of these classrooms, you need to be doing temperature checks. All right, and I'm not talking about the temperature check that we've been doing at the front door for the last 10 months. I'm talking about, doing a temperature check on your employees. All right, are they maintaining composure? Or are they not themselves today? Are they a little off today? All right, and when you see that, we need to ask about it. Hey, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? But we need to constantly be doing that emotional check on our caregivers while they're in the classroom, and be proactive to providing them support before they lose judgment and before they lose that self-control. All right. Now, another pre-recorded webinar that I'm going to recommend to you is I did one a couple of months ago on maintaining composure in a school-age program. Now, that one is specific to school-age programs, but the material is basically applicable to any age group right there. And I'm actually planning on redoing that one at the beginning of 2021 during one of my Tim at 10 Facebook Live events. I want to redo it, number one, to include all age groups, but number two, we didn't get a very good video recording on it, so I'm not happy with the quality of the video, so I want to redo it. But it is a good pre-recorded webinar about maintaining composure. Now, when we talk about demonstrate competency, good judgment, and self-control, y'all hear me say this all the time. It's just like being on an airplane and that safety briefing, before the plane takes off. They always say that in the event of a loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will fall in front of you. What do they say next? You put your mask on first before you assist the person next to you. And, maintaining composure is just that. You have to maintain composure first. And you cannot support your employees until you are composed yourself. All right? And if you're triggered, all right, then that's going to allow your employees to be triggered. All right, so very, very important that the leader of the program practice composure every single day. All right, now why did 1,300 programs, over 1,300 programs, get cited for this over the last 2 years? What I have seen is that, especially during investigations, this is a very commonly cited standard in investigations, all right? That licensing will say the employee did not use good judgment when they, slammed the child down in the chair. Or the employee did not use self-control when they yanked the child's arm, or whatever the situation may be. But they love using good judgment and self-control in investigations, and I've seen it so many times. I had a program in Mesquite, Texas, this has been several years ago, that I helped them do an administrative review that they actually got cited for this standard. And on the narrative, it said the director used poor judgment when they hired this particular employee. You know, well, when this director hired this employee, she had no idea that 6 months later she would whack a kid upside the head. There's no way you could have predicted that. So, you know, I helped that school do an administrative review on this particular standard. But, you know, I've actually seen that the director used poor judgment when they made this particular decision. All right. So this is a tough one, especially during investigations when they come back and they say the director or the caregiver did not demonstrate competency, good judgment, or self-control. That's a tough one to argue because it's a very opinionated comment. All right, and it's hard to argue that unless you've got some really good concrete proof. All right, so the main thing is that, you know, we want to lend skills to our caregivers so that they can, you know, demonstrate that competency, maintain composure, and make good choices. Y'all know what they always say. Never make a decision when you're angry, when you're stressed, when you're upset. That's when you make bad choices, all right? And actually a lot of the leadership books say never make a decision when you're angry, when you're stressed, when you're upset, when you're tired, when you're hungry, and when you don't feel good, all right? Some of you might be going, well, I'm never making a decision. All right, I'm usually one of all of the above, all right? But that's, you know, there's a lot of truth behind that. You know, you do make bad choices in those situations, all right? So be very aware of 746, 1201, number 1, demonstrate competency, good judgment, and self-control. All right, let's move along here. The next one is another item that has been in the top 10 list over the last 3 years. It was number 6 in 2017. In 2018, it was number 4 on the list, 762 deficiencies. And in 2019, it was also number 4, 703 deficiencies in 2019. And this one is 746, 3701. So 3701. What safety precautions must I take to protect the children in my center? Now, there are 9 items listed under 3701. The list that you pull off of licensing's website that gives you the top 10 standards, they didn't tell us which one. It just says 3701. So, we get to make an assumption here on which one of these is the top cited item. I think I know what it is. But what safety precautions must I take to protect the children in my care, in my center? Number 1, that your electrical outlets that are accessible to children under the age of 5 have a child-proof cover or a safety outlet installed. Your 220-volt electrical connectors must be covered with a screen guard. Air conditioners, fans, or heaters must be mounted out of the reach of children. Glass or sliding doors must be clearly marked. All right. Play material and equipment must be safe and free from sharp edges. All right. And not have toxic paints. Poisonous plants are inaccessible to children. Storage chests, boxes, trunks, and other similar equipment have hinged lids. All bodies of water, such as pools, hot tubs, ponds, creeks, bird baths, fountains, buckets, and rain barrels are inaccessible to children. And televisions must be anchored so that they cannot tip over. All right? So those are the 9 items that are listed under the safety precautions. What do y'all think? Let me ask you, which of these 9 safety precautions do you think over 1,400 centers were cited for over the last 2 years? Y'all type that into your chat screen right here. Let's see what y'all have to say. Which of the 9 do you think is the most commonly cited? While y'all are typing that in, I'm just going to share something funny with you. On number 8, where it says all bodies of water must be inaccessible to children, and it says pools, hot tubs, ponds, creeks, bird baths, fountains, buckets, and rain barrels. Which one of you has the hot tub in the pre-K room? I've been looking for over 20 years to see which one of you has the hot tub in the classroom. But that one always cracks me up. Obviously someone's done it, or it wouldn't be in here. And remember, these are the standards for licensed centers, not homes. So if we're talking about registered homes, that would make sense to me, but we're talking about centers. I'm still looking for who has the hot tub. I'm going to guess that it's the same program that has the margarita machine in the staff lounge. That's what I'm thinking. All right. So I see your answers coming in, and y'all are on the same page as me. I believe it is the electrical outlets that you're getting cited for. And I'm seeing that boom, 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 boom. A lot of you are saying the electrical outlets. Yes, because the cleaning crew comes in and they take it out to plug in the vacuum, and then they don't put it back in, or your teacher plugs something in and then they don't put it back. Yes, I have to agree. My suggestion to you on this one is it's an investment, but invest in the safety outlets, and have those installed in your program, even if you do it one classroom at a time, as you can afford it. I think it's worth your investment. And over the course of time, they're going to pay for themselves, all right? That's, what I believe is the best suggestion right there. And then you don't have to worry about these outlet covers. I see a lot of you saying number 5, the play material and equipment must be safe and free from sharp or rough edges. I have to agree with that one too. If it's not the electrical outlets, I think it's number 5, that we have broken or damaged equipment in your classrooms. So again, it's not just the director's responsibility to make sure you're in compliance. It is also the employees' and caregivers' responsibility. So when you have a piece of equipment that is broken or damaged, we got to get it out of the room, all right? It's got to go. So have a good system in place for getting that out and getting it replaced. This has been a long time ago, but about 15 years ago, I was aware of a program in Dallas that had one of those little type houses, those plastic little type houses in one of the classrooms. And, they have the plastic screws that you put it together. And one of those plastic screws had, started coming out and was protruding. And, the teacher kept telling the director, hey, some kid's going to get hurt on this screw. And the director was like, okay, I'll get the maintenance man to take it out. And it just never got taken out. And one day, this little girl climbed up on top of that house, that Little Tykes house, and then she slid down, kind of like a slide. And when she slid down, she caught that screw right here on her cheek, and it ripped her all the way from her mouth to her ear, ripped her open. She ended up having to have plastic surgery from the damage done, the injury from that little tyke house with the screw. And that's a horrible story right there, but it was a great example of how, and then, it turned into a big legal battle because the teacher was saying, I kept telling the director it wasn't safe, and the director was like, I kept telling, someone to take it out, and, bottom line is it should have been taken out. All right, so yes, all right. The other one that I think is probably a commonly cited item under 3701 is the television being anchored. This is a newer standard that has been added over the last 5 years, and y'all know we've had a couple of situations here in Texas where a child has pulled a TV off of a cart and severely injured, and in one case a child died in a licensed program from a TV falling on top of him. So they've added that it has to be anchored so that it cannot tip over. Of course, we don't have TVs in our classroom, so if you don't have anything, then you don't have to worry about it. And remember, we do have new standards coming out, probably going to be January now is what I'm predicting, that is going to limit screen time even more so than now. So it's going to be cut down to 1 hour a day. And then also one of the new standards that you're going to see is that you cannot use screen time during meal time, during nap time. All right, those items have to be turned off. So there is an open comment period right now. They had to make some amendments to the proposed language, and so we are in a public comment period right now, but that is ending here pretty soon. So I predict that we'll get our new standards probably in January at this point. All right. So there you go. Yeah, easy solution to this one is to remove the TV. All right, moving on. We only have a couple of the most commonly cited left, and then we'll get to the most commonly misunderstood. All right, so the next one I have right here was number 3 in 2019. All right, and this one we're going to go back to the Texas Administrative Code, the 745 manual. And if you don't have a copy of the Texas Administrative Code, this is all located online on the Texas Department of Health and Human Services website. You can pull the entire manual up online, and it's pretty easy to access, but these are a lot of your administrative rules right here. But 745-641, all right, 742 programs were not only cited for this one in 2019, but you also received an administrative penalty. So you were fined and had to pay money. All right, and once again, this is going to go back to how soon after I submit a request for a background check on a subject can they be present in the operation. 742 people allowed a brand new employee to be present, to have direct contact with the children before they received that eligibility letter. All right. So this was a big one in 2019. And remember, in January of 2019 is when those eligibility letters started coming out. Instead of us getting the 3 emails that we used to get, we get the eligibility letter now, and that started in 2019. But I wanted to point something out very important to you, and I want you to be aware of this in case you ever run into this situation. Under 745-641, it does say you must receive notification from the CBCU that the subject of a background check is eligible with conditions, or provisional, eligible with conditions before allowing the subject to be present in your operation. However, Pending the eligibility determination, the subject may be present at an operation for the sole purpose of attending orientation or pre-service training, as long as the subject does not have contact with children in care. All right, so that's pretty big right there. That's pretty big right there. That, you know, you can have that brand new employee in your program doing orientation and pre-service training while you are waiting on the eligibility form to come in. They just cannot have direct contact with children. They cannot be counted in child staff ratio or have direct contact with children. But you can have them on the premises doing orientation or pre-service training. All right. The reason why I'm pointing this out, and I'm making kind of a big deal about it, is that I know of multiple programs that have been cited for this, that licensing has came in and said that person cannot be in your building until you have that eligibility letter. If this happens to you, you need to do an administrative review, all right? Because you can have them in the building doing orientation or pre-service training. They just cannot have direct access to children, all right? So I wanted to point that out to you, okay? Hopefully, you know, that doesn't happen right there. Keep in mind also on this particular topic that, you know, the Texas Administrative Code does say that you must do your criminal background check on anyone that you are considering hiring. So technically, you should be doing that background check before you hire them, not after you hire them. And we're getting our results pretty quick. Usually within 24 hours, you're getting that eligibility letter. Even if you have to send them for a fingerprinting, once they're fingerprinted, you're getting that eligibility letter usually within 24 hours. They've really stepped up their game on this one. The problem that we're having, especially right now, is scheduling your fingerprinting. That there's a lot of the locations that are very, very backed up or have closed down, and so it's hard to get that appointment right now. But they have been opening up some temporary locations to help ease that issue. But if you're hiring someone that has previous experience and there hasn't been a lapse in their employment, they've already been fingerprinted, you should get that eligibility letter pretty quick. If you don't get an eligibility letter within 24 hours, that's usually a red flag, all right? That usually means that you're going to get something that is provisional, or you're going to get something with conditions, or you're going to get something that they're ineligible, all right? Is usually what that means right there, all right? But you know, licensing is aware of the scheduling of fingerprinting issue, and I think they've been very active on trying to address that right there, all right? Moving right along, the next standard, we've got 2 left, and then we'll get into some of the most misunderstood, all right? Michelle is saying the out-of-state fingerprinting, that's, you know, still taking a little bit of time depending on what state that person has lived in. My biggest suggestion to you who are hiring someone that has worked in another state, you need to make sure that you're proactive and you're telling this applicant, hey, you're going to be getting an email from Child Care Licensing with instructions on what to do to get your background transferred to Texas. As soon as you receive that email, give me a call or let me know so that you can help them get that completed. Usually the turnaround time is because the candidate is not getting the information turned in that is needed right there. All right. So that's a suggestion. All right, next one. Again, this one has been in the top 10 list for the last 3 years. It was number 3 in 2017. It was number 5 in 2018. There were 752 programs cited for this in 2018. And it was number 2 in 2019. 772 programs were cited for this standard in 2019. And this one is 746-3407. 3407, so 3407. What steps must I take to ensure a healthy environment for the children at my center? All right. Now, just like the safety precautions, they told us that 746-3407, had been cited over 1,500 times over the last 2 years. They did not mention which of the 13 items is most commonly cited. So we'll kind of go through this just like we did with safety precautions. So you must clean, repair, and maintain the building, the grounds, and the equipment to protect the health of the children. This includes, but not limited to, setting aside toys and equipment that have been placed in children's mouths or otherwise have been contaminated by a bodily fluid, machine washing your cloth toys, machine washing your linens, sanitizing sleeping equipment before a different child uses it, sanitizing your potty chairs, emptying water play tables, maintaining sandboxes, making sure garbage is inaccessible to children, keeping all floors, ceilings, and walls in good repair, keeping all parts of your program well heated, lighted, and ventilated, sanitizing tabletops, furniture, and other similar equipment, clearly marking cleaning supplies and making them inaccessible to children, and using, storing, and disposing of hazardous materials. All right, those are the 13 items that are listed under 3407. And like I said, over 1,500 programs were cited for this over the last 2 years. So what's your opinion? Type into the chat screen, out of those 13 items, what do you think is being cited the most? What steps must I take to ensure a healthy environment for the children in your program? Which of the 13 do you think we are falling behind on? And I've got a couple of things to say about this one right here. And while you're typing that in, this is definitely a standard that it's going to be very interesting to see where it comes in 2020. All right. So I've got some comments coming in now. The sanitizing tabletops, furniture, and other similar equipment. Yes, that's the one that I think is the number one also. And the key there is the sanitizing other similar equipment. So you got to think outside of the box. What all furniture and equipment does the children have access to that they can get bodily fluid on? And play a game with your staff, all right? Make a list of all of the different items that they touch that we need to be sanitizing throughout the day. Bridget is saying machine washing items. I have to agree with that too. Making sure that that home center clothing or your soft materials are being machine washed. Yes, I see that one popping up a couple of times. Brad, I have to agree. If it's not the sanitizing, keeping cleaning supplies out of the reach of children, I think that's one of the top items as well. All right, so you kind of hit that one on the head. People leaving their chemicals out so that children can get their hands on them. I do believe that's one of the top items too. All right. Yeah, so I see a lot of good comments coming in. The changing table, making sure that we're sanitizing that. Now, of course, right now, today is, what is today? December 4th, 2020. We are still under our executive orders from the Department of Health and Human Services. So right now, you should not have anything in your classrooms that cannot be sanitized or washed. So any equipment or materials that are non-washable, you can't spray your sanitizer on it, you should have that removed at this point in time. A lot of your items that go in the washing machine, because you do need to wash it or sanitize it before another child uses it right now. So, the best rule of thumb is that we've removed those items from the classroom. Another one that I didn't, unless I missed it, I did not see someone mention this, but another item that I think is very commonly cited is sanitizing sleeping equipment before a different child uses it. And I actually have this one in my most misunderstood standards as well. Because, it does say right here, sanitize sleeping equipment before a different child uses it. But then later on in the standards, it talks about your sleeping equipment. So cots or mats must be labeled with a child's name or labeled with a number related to a number assignment to a child. That whole labeling, is if you're not sanitizing after each use. And sometimes you got to take that standard and refer it back to right here, sanitize sleeping equipment before a different child uses it. So if you're sanitizing your sleeping equipment after every nap time, then that whole labeling business, you shouldn't have to worry about. All right. Pick your battles wisely on this one. And if you have a licensing rep that is adamant about your cots or mats being labeled, just do it. All right. Just do it. Pick your battles wisely. But you can easily refer back to 3407, number 4, that I'm sanitizing before another child uses it. All right. Now, what I've always said on this particular standard is that I always recommend that you sanitize your cots or mats after each nap time because I do believe that, when children sleep, they leak. All right? So you're going to have bodily fluid, on that. So I like to sanitize those, regardless. And of course, some of you do the crib sheets or sheets on the cots and mats. That's going to be helpful as well. All right. So that's a big one right there, especially right now in 2020 with all of our enhanced health practices. 3407, this whole page should be tattooed on your head at this point in time. All right. All of your caregivers should pretty much know this page word for word after 2020 right there. So yeah. All right, y'all ready for the drum roll? The number 1 cited item in the book. All right, the number 1 cited item in the book. Again, this has been on the top 10 list for the last 3 years. It was number 1 in 2017. It was number 2 in 2018. There were 1,119 programs cited for this in 2018, and it was number 1 again in 2019. 1,283 programs were cited for this standard in 2019. So what do y'all think it is? All right, over 2,300 programs were cited for this standard over the last 2 years. What do y'all think? All right. Tiffany is saying she thinks that it's playground. Maybe, Maybe. I'm going to circle back to Tiffany's answer. Jennifer is guessing mulch. It's not mulch, although that is a big one. I was surprised that mulch didn't show up on the top 10 list, but that's a good one. I see hand washing. Nope, it's not hand washing. Not hand washing, but that's a commonly cited item too. We've already talked about training and professional development. Charity and Cameron and Karen, and now Vanessa, you're getting the gold star. You got it. Supervision of children. All right. 746, 1203, number 4. All right. Is the number 1 cited item over the last 3 years. So supervise children at all times. All right. So there you go. Why do y'all think? Over 2,300 programs were cited for supervision over the last 3 years? What do you think is distracting our caregivers and creating this failure to supervise our children adequately? What do y'all think is happening? I see a lot of comments popping up about playground supervision, and I have to agree with you on that one. So that's why I said I was going to circle back to playground. I do believe that playground supervision is the biggest issue right here. People become complacent and relaxed on the playground, and they tend to want to visit with the other adults instead of supervising the children. Now, I will tell you that I have a very strict policy that employees are not allowed to sit on the playground. That is grounds for immediate termination, in my opinion. They need to be engaged on the playground. I see a lot of people commenting on cell phones, personal use of electronic devices, and that is a big distraction. Yeah, come on, folks. We've had that standard for 10 years now. Can y'all believe that? Personal use of electronic devices, that's been in our book for 10 years now, but it still, I agree, is such a huge distraction for our teachers. And Jessica, I have to agree with you. Now we got to worry about these. All right, the smartwatches. And this is distracting them, from properly supervising your staff. I see some comments about ratios and the number of children that they're having to, take care of. Dealing with a challenging behavior or an ill child, and your focus being on one individual child and not the whole group, that creates a supervision issue as well. I agree with that. So we need to work on some engagement and interaction with that one right there. All right. Visiting with each other, being distracted by other adults. I see that popping up as an opinion, and I have to agree with that. All right. I just did a Saturday workshop last month on safety and supervision techniques. It was a 3-hour workshop, and we talked a lot about enhancing our supervision in the classroom and being aware of these distractions, being aware of sight, sound, awareness, proximity, positioning. These are all items we need to be aware of to properly supervise our children. So if you missed that workshop, again, it is located on my website, timthetrainer.com. Go to online trainings and scroll down. They're in alphabetical order. But I have a 3-hour video on safety and supervision that you can watch, or you can refer your teachers to right there. That will be helpful for you. All right. Awesome. All right. So it's usually around March, give or take a couple of months, whenever we get these reports from child care licensing. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the top 10 list looks like in 2020. especially with our pandemic and our emergency orders, the number of programs that's had to close during this year. It's going to be interesting to compare what we have there coming up versus what we have right now. All right, let's talk now about some of the most misunderstood standards in the book. And this is a list that I put together based on my experience working with all of you and the phone calls and emails that we get in our office, a lot. And so I'll kind of go through here and we'll have some conversations and be able to see, if y'all agree or if this is helpful. Yes, this video is being recorded, so it will be available to watch later on if you need to. All right, so it'll be posted on our website and on Facebook. So the first couple of items that I have on my list, and these are in no particular order, okay? But the first couple of items are referring to terms and definitions. So starting on page 5 of your minimum standards, there's a couple of the terms and definitions that I think a lot of people misunderstand. And usually whenever I see either a director or licensing rep that disagree on a particular standard, it's usually due to somebody not understanding a term or definition. And licensing has worked really hard over the last 5 years to clarify and clean up some of these terms and definitions to make them more easily understandable. I think they've done a great job. And even with the new standards that we should be getting in the near future, you're going to see even more clarification. So they've done great on this. The first one that I am going to talk about is on page 5, and it's number 25, the definition of frequent. All right, and frequent is more than 2 times in a 30-day period. And they're going to refer you to the Texas Administrative Code 745-601, all right, which is who must you do a criminal background check on. And basically it's going to tell you you have to do a criminal background check on anyone that is in your program on a regular or frequent basis, which is more than 2 times in a 30-day period. All right. Now, if this individual is counted in child-staff ratio and have direct contact with children, then you need to be doing the background check. But let's say you invite the dentist in to talk to the kids during oral hygiene week, or you have a firefighter that comes in during fire prevention week, a photographer that comes in and is taking pictures of the kids. All right, these individuals right here, if they're not in your program on a regular or frequent basis, then you don't have to do a background check on them. Now again, they cannot be left alone with the children, they cannot be counted in child-staff ratio, but if it's just a one-time deal, you should be good, all right? But they've added the definition of frequent to the minimum standards for this clarification, all right? Now, I see a question about a therapist that is coming in. Is that therapist coming into your program more than 2 times in a 30-day period? Usually, yes, all right, they are. Now, if it is a therapist that is with early childhood intervention, they're typically going to have a background check on file that, they will usually give you some documentation to show that they're good. If it's an outside therapist hired by the parent, you need to be doing the background check, all right? Here's my thing about this, because this is a big down to interpretation issue, all right? And licensing, again, has been working really hard to get everyone on the same page here, but it is still an interpretation issue. My advice to you is, when in doubt, do a background check. all right? And you can do that background check as a volunteer or whatnot, you know, so there you go. Or contact your local licensing rep and ask them for their interpretation of the rule, okay? So, you know, that would be my suggestion. And you hear me say that sometimes when we talk about minimum standards. Contact your local licensing rep for their interpretation of the rule, and always get that in writing. So emailing is good because then you got it in writing right there. All right. So Heidi is asking, then why do we have to do a criminal background check for a working interview? Because then you've got direct access to children. All right. It's the direct access to children that is coming into play right there. And then just also take caution with working interviews, because then you go into a wage and hour issue then. That if it's a working interview, you have to pay them. So you know, be careful with those. I'm an advocate for it, trust me. I support you in doing those working interviews. I think they're important, but you want to make sure that all of your, you know, everything is checked off right there. All right, but again, when in doubt, do the background check, you know, or contact your local licensing rep for their interpretation of the rule. And also remember that you can never do a criminal background check on anyone without their written permission. So anyone that you do a criminal background check on, make sure that you're having them complete that background check application, and most important, make sure they're signing it. But it is a Class A misdemeanor to do a background check on someone without their permission. So that's pretty important. The next item on my most misunderstood list on page 5 also is number 32, and that is the definition of an infant. An infant is defined by licensing as a child birth through 17 months. The reason why I have this on my list of most misunderstood standards is that it's the 12 to 17 month olds that people get in trouble for. When we go back to the basic care requirements for each age group, so what equipment and materials must you have for each age group, that's under the basic care requirements. A lot of you call your 12 to 17 month old room a toddler room, all right? You can call it whatever you want, but licensing considers that 12 to 17 month old group infants. So you need to make sure that you're meeting all of the basic care requirements for infants and that 12 to 17 month old group, all right? Not the basic care requirements for toddlers, all right? But I see a lot of people, you know, have deficiencies over that young toddler group, and they're meeting the wrong basic care requirements, all right? So that's why I have that one on the list. All right, the other one that I have on page 5 is number 35. So I got a question. If we have someone that comes in to support and supervise children during nap time 1 day a week, and they are left alone with the students, they would need to meet all caregiver qualifications, yes. So they would have to have your orientation, your pre-service, 24 hours of training. All caregiver qualifications have to be met in that situation. That was a good question. All right, so number 35 is janitorial duties, all right? And this is a big one, and this used to be a super big issue. Licensing has done a really good job of cleaning this up, no pun intended. So I'm not hearing about this as often as I used to, but I do hear it from time to time. But a janitorial duty are those duties that involve the cleaning and maintenance of the child care center building, room, furniture, etc. Cleaning and maintenance include such duties as cleaning carpets, sweeping cots, sweeping, vacuuming, or mopping a restroom or a classroom. Period. New sentence. All right, sweeping up after an activity or mopping up a spill in a classroom that is immediately necessary for the children's safety is not considered a janitorial duty. And it's that last sentence that is so important and the reason why I have this one on my list. If you have to clean something up immediately to protect the health and safety of the children, that is not a janitorial duty. So cleaning up after lunch, cleaning up after a child vomits in your classroom, cleaning up after a child has an accident and there's fecal matter in the classroom. These are all items that have to be done right now. So that is not a janitorial duty. And we used to have a big problem with, licensing citing this. A teacher would be cleaning up after lunch and, they would come in and cite them for performing a janitorial duty. Well, I have to sweep up those peas and macaroni right now. I can't leave that till the end of the day, all right? So I want y'all to be aware of this particular definition. The way I like to describe this is that if it's something that can wait till the end of the day, that's a janitorial duty. All right? If it's something that can't wait till the end of the day, that's not a janitorial duty. And the reason why we point this out is that your caregivers that are counted in child staff ratio and supervising a group of children cannot perform janitorial duties while they are counted in child staff ratio, while they are supervising a group. All right. One of the worksheet questions that you're going to see on your worksheet is what is the difference between a janitorial duty and cleaning up after an activity or mopping up a spill? And so, the answer I'm going to be looking for is that, cleaning up after an activity or mopping up a spill in the classroom is immediately necessary for the children's safety. Can't wait till the end of the day. All right. The next item on my most misunderstood list is on page 6, number 43. And this is the definition of sanitize. And the reason why I have this one on here is that, oh, thank you, Angel. And yeah, I know that there is another webinar competing with me at 11 o'clock, and some of you are jumping off to hop on that. But I completely understand. I have people doing that one for me and going to give me feedback. But anyways, the reason why I have the definition of sanitize on my list is that, what basically happened in 2016 is they said that if you're using a chemical that is registered with the EPA, that you're going to follow the manufacturer's instructions for sanitizing. And you don't have to do that 4-step process if you're following the manufacturer's instructions. What I want you to be aware of is that whatever chemical you're using that is registered with the EPA, it has to have instructions for sanitizing. And the word sanitizing is what you got to be looking for. All right? If the word sanitize is not in those instructions, then you got to do the 4-step process. All right? And that's the big thing right there. Make sure that the word sanitize is in the instructions. And then, like I said, this has been a great rule change because depending on the chemical that you're using, it has really cut down on the amount of time it takes to sanitize and disinfect our classrooms. Now again, with 2020, we've become experts at this one right here. So there you go. I also have on page 6, number 46, the definition of self-study training. All right. And self-study is that non-standardized training where people read written material or they watch a video or they listen to a recording, and that's it. All right, that would be self-study, and you can only get 3 hours a year with self-study material. The difference between self-study and self-instructional. Self-instructional material is also written material, a video, or a recording, but self-instructional material also has a quiz or worksheet with right or wrong answers, and a certificate of completion is provided by the training. That's what makes it different from self-study, okay? So, a video or an online training or written material, if it has a worksheet with right or wrong answers and a certificate of completion is provided by the trainer, that is self-instructional. If there is no worksheet, there's no quiz, there's no certificate provided to you, that's self-study. All right? Now, my recommendation to y'all is just to put a big X on this one and avoid self-study training. All right? Make sure that there is a worksheet or quiz with right or wrong answers. Make sure that there is a certificate provided by the trainer. You're good. All right? But that one has confused the heck out of people. All right? It's been very confusing over the last 5 years, but I think people are finally understanding. The next most misunderstood item that I have on my list, and again, these are in no particular order, is on page 11, 746-305, and that is what other situations require notification to licensing. And number 2, injury to a child in your care that requires treatment by a healthcare professional. Okay, hear me out on this one. Okay, hear me out. If you have a child that is injured in your program and the parent takes the child to the healthcare professional and the healthcare professional simply examines the child and that's it, technically that does not require notification to licensing. All right? If the healthcare professional does something to the child, so they treat them, all right, so they stitch up the arm, or they put a cast on the leg, or they dig a rock out of the ear, or they do an x-ray, that's all considered treatment. So that would require notification to licensing, all right? But if they just examine, you shouldn't have to report. All right. Now, when in doubt, if you're ever, scratching your head going, I wonder if I should report this. When in doubt, make the report. I would rather you make a report and get told you don't have to report this than not make the report and you should have. All right. So, when in doubt, make the report. If you know it's one of those parents, make the report. If you know you have one of those licensing reps, and y'all know who I'm talking about, make the report. All right? That's the best rule of thumb. And there's nothing wrong with a self-report. Don't be afraid of having a self-report on your record. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the outcome of the self-report that is important. All right? So there you go. And we are going to see some language change on this one right here with the new standards that we'll be getting in the near future. It's now going to say injury to a child in your care that requires treatment by a healthcare professional or hospitalization. And they're going to be adding that with the new standards. On that same topic, notification to parents. Right now it says you must notify a parent if a child is injured and the injury requires attention from a healthcare professional. And we've always, had this debate over what's the difference between attention and treatment. And the two standards have said two different things. One says treatment, one says attention. Well, they're finally going to clean this up. And so when we get our new standards, here in the near future, you're going to see that they're going to use the word treatment on both parents and licensing. So that'll be good. All right, 746, 611 on page 22, we've already talked about with our most commonly cited items, but must I have a health statement for the children in my care? Yes, a written statement from a healthcare professional who has examined that child within the past year, indicating that they are able to take part of the program. So we've already talked about this, making sure you get that physician statement. The reason why I have this in my most misunderstood list is that you only have to get the signature from the healthcare professional once. It's not every year. And a lot of people think that they have to get a new signature from the healthcare professional every year. That's not what it says, okay? It's a one-time deal. The reason why I think people are misunderstanding this one is that they're looking at number 3, where it says that, you have to have the signature from the healthcare professional within 12 months of the date of admission. And I think that's the part that's confusing folks, all right? That you think that you have to get a signature every 12 months. That's not it, all right? Get that signature up front, you're done, you get to move along, all right? 746-901 on page 29 of the standards. What information must I maintain in my personnel records? So there's 3 items that I want to point out right here. Documentation showing how the employee meets the minimum age, and typically you're going to get a copy of their driver's license, a copy of their state issued ID, a military ID, a passport. All of these items are acceptable. Number 8, a copy of a photo identification. And then number 9, a copy of their current driver's license if they are transporting children. All right. These need to be current photos. All right. So they need to be a current driver's license, state issued ID, passport, military ID, etc. So for example, if you're making a copy of that driver's license to show the minimum age, or a copy of that driver's license to show photo identification, it has to be a current driver's license. So you need to make note of when it expires. And if the employee's driver's license expires, you need to get a new copy. All right. I don't know why, because the information doesn't change, whether it's expired or not. I completely understand the reason for number 9, that it has to be a current driver's license if they are transporting children. All right, totally get that. But for number 2 and number 8, I see people, cited for that. All right. There you go. And to answer Erica, you're saying that within 12 months, that's within the upon the time of enrollment. All right, within 12 months upon the time of enrollment. All right, so there you go. Now, if you want to, going back to the health statement, if you want to exceed and get a new signature every year, go for it. All right, but it's based on the time of enrollment. All right, there you go. Let's see, personnel records. So make sure you have that current copy right there. All right. The next one, this is a big one, y'all. This is a big one. 746-1301 on page 44 of the minimum standards. let me answer Karen's question real quick. 746-901 is the driver's license, number 9, on page 29 of the book. So there you go. All right, so let's talk about professional development, 746-1301. We talked about professional development at the beginning of our webinar with our most commonly cited items, but where I want to, what I want to talk about right here is your pediatric first aid with rescue breathing and your pediatric CPR, all right? Now, for many, many years, we have always combined CPR and first aid. We lump them together. We've done that for years, all right? It is time, for a long time we've needed to do this. It is time for you to, CPR and first aid need to get a divorce. Okay, we got to separate them. Okay, time for them to get a divorce. And there's several reasons why we need to separate our conversation about first aid and CPR. All right, you're going to notice on page 44, number 3, that each caregiver and each director must have pediatric first aid with rescue breathing. Now remember, this changed in October of 2018. It used to say 1 person per group. Now it's every caregiver and every director must have pediatric first aid with rescue breathing. And you're going to see that pediatric first aid with rescue breathing must be done within 90 days of employment and before having unsupervised access to the children in care. So in other words, you cannot leave an employee alone in a classroom until they have pediatric first aid with rescue breathing. They cannot be left alone in a classroom until they have that. All right? With pediatric CPR, okay, once again, that has to be done by every caregiver and director. That changed in October of 2018. You're going to see here that you have 90 days to get your CPR done. All right? So the difference between first aid and CPR, first aid, they have to have it done before they can be left alone. CPR, you've got 90 days to get it done. All right, so you're going to want to get that pediatric first aid, during your orientation and pre-service. You're going to have that done. Another reason why it's time for first aid and CPR to get a divorce, we got to separate them. All right, your pediatric first aid can be done through self-instructional material. So you can do this online, you can do it with a module, you can do it with a video, or it can be done instructor-led. But your first aid, your pediatric first aid, can be done through self-instructional material. CPR, the skills portion of CPR has to be done instructor-led. Okay, the skills portion of CPR cannot be done online. All right. So another reason why they've got to be separated. Okay, we got to start looking at them differently. And the other reason is that we talked about this just a little bit at the beginning of the webinar, but you must pay employees for their time spent in meetings and trainings. All right, you do not have to pay for time spent earning a certification or a credential. All right? Pediatric first aid with rescue breathing is a training. You have to pay them for their time spent doing that course. CPR is a certification. You technically don't have to pay for their time when they're earning their CPR certification. So that's another reason why we got to separate them. All right, because the wage and hour part is different. Also, I want y'all to make note right here that it does say pediatric first aid with rescue breathing, pediatric CPR. So wherever you're getting these trainings and certifications from, make sure that pediatric or a related term is being used. That's been big with licensing over the last 2 years as well. And then the last thing I want to say about this one is that they have to stay current. All right. Pediatric first aid with rescue breathing is the only training that the training certificate has to have an expiration date. All right. So, make sure you're looking for that. And then they have to stay current on their CPR. So you're going to have a good system in place to make sure you're tracking that and make sure that they don't expire. We had a situation at one of my schools where my director did a very good job of anticipating people that were coming due for their CPR, and she scheduled a class and told everyone that was coming close to being due, hey, you need to attend the CPR class on Tuesday night. All right, cool. Well, Tuesday morning, this particular teacher came in and said, oh, something came up, and I'm not going to be able to make it tonight. And so we had to say, well, that's too bad, because your CPR expires on Thursday. So if you're not able to make it tonight, you've got until Thursday to go somewhere else and get renewed, or you don't have a job on Thursday. All right. And she was like, oh, and she was suddenly able to clear her schedule and attend that night. All right. But that's basically, how it goes. If they are not current, they can't be there anymore. Got to go. All right. 746, 1605 on page 60. All right. In my opinion, this is the most misunderstood standard in the book. All right. And for years now, I've said that this is the most misunderstood standard in the book. But 746, 1605, may I combine infants with children 18 months and older? All right. It says yes, if you have 13 or more children in care, you may combine infants with older children as long as the oldest child in the group is no more than 18 months older than the youngest child. Okay? So you cannot have more than an 18-month difference between the youngest and oldest child in a group. But that 18-month variance rule, it only applies when there is a child in the group younger than 18 months. Okay? It does not apply to every group. It's only when there is a child younger than 18 months in the group that you can't have more than an 18-month difference between youngest and oldest child. All right? Montessori's would be a great example here. You see a lot of primary groupings in Montessori programs. So it's very, very common to see a young 3-year-old with an older 5-year-old in a Montessori classroom. Now there's definitely more than an 18-month difference between youngest and oldest child, but that's okay because there's nobody in that group younger than 18 months. All right, so there you go. Now, if you just want to follow that 18-month variance rule and say we're not going to have more than an 18-month variance between youngest and oldest child, and you want to apply that across the board, that would be exceeding. All right, you would be exceeding the standards and you would be okay. All right, if you want to do that just to play it safe. Now, your after-school programs would probably be the only area that you're not going to be able to do this. But just know that that 18-month variance is only when there is a child under 18 months in the group. All right. So that's a big one. Next one I'll go over really quick. I see. I'm sorry, Cecilia. I missed your question. Do parents have to have a valid driver's license on file as well? That is not something that is required by licensing. There is no standard or regulation on that. However, I strongly recommend that when you enroll a new child, that you ask for the parent's ID and you verify that the names on the ID matches the names on the enrollment form. All right, I strongly encourage you to do this. All right, when you're giving a tour, all right, anytime a prospective parent comes in and wants to take a tour of your program, have them fill out a tour inquiry form where they're going to write down their name and address, phone number, email, and then ask them for their ID. Verify that they really are who they say they are. All right. And I want you to think about, any of y'all that have ever, leased an apartment. When you go shopping for an apartment, what do? They ask you for your driver's license or ID, and then they even lock it up until you're done with the tour. All right. And that's to keep that leasing agent safe. All right. But it's also to verify that this person isn't pretending to be someone that they're not. We need to be doing the same thing. All right. You need to be doing the same thing. And I'm also recommending, again, this is not a standard or regulation. There's no requirement here. But I'm also recommending that you're requiring a copy of the birth certificate upon enrollment. And you're verifying, once again, that the information entered on the enrollment form matches the birth certificate. Whoever they're writing down as mother and father, does it match what's on the birth certificate? All right. And definitely I've been recommending that for the last couple of years. All right. So, I got a question. So if I have a group of 10, but the older is 37 months, so a 17-month-old cannot be in care then, correct? Well, you in that situation, if you have a group of 10, if it's just a group of 10, then that would be correct. Now, if you have only 10 children in care, like in the entire building, you only have 10 kids, then you're going to refer to that nasty little chart that is in the ratio chapter, and you're going to want to look at that chart for guidance on the mixture of children. All right. But that's if you just have, the less than 13 children in the entire building. But if we do have more than 13 kids in the entire building and you have a group of 10, then you would have that 18-month variance rule right there. So hopefully that answers that question. All right. All right. So 746-2101 is going to be your ratio for water activities. All right. And a water activity is defined as, splashing or wading pools 2 feet or less. And what I want you to highlight right here, where people get this one misunderstood, is it's a splashing or wading pool, all right, that is 2 feet of water or less. So a water table or a sensory table would not fall into this category. So because a child is not climbing inside of that water table. Hopefully not. They shouldn't be, right? But a lot of times people think that if I have a water table in my classroom, then I've got to follow the ratio for water activities during that time. And no, this right here, 2101, is for splashing or wading pools, all right? 2 feet of water or less. So your water tables, all right, would not fall into this category. Okay, moving right along, 2421. on page 84 of the standards. What written feeding instructions must I obtain for your infants not eating table food? B as in boy, you must review and update the feeding instructions with the parent every 30 days, all right, until the infant is able to eat table food. I'm actually surprised that this one is not in the top 10 list. I'm pretty shocked that this one is not in the top 10 list because I see this cited a lot. All right, make sure you got a good system in place that you're updating those feeding instructions every 30 days. Now, the reason why I have this one on my most misunderstood list, it's not so much that it's misunderstood. It's just that there's a lot of different guidance given on this one. Some licensing reps will say that you have to have a brand new feeding instruction every 30 days completed by the parent. Some licensing reps will say if nothing has changed, the parent can just initial and say no change, all right? What I'm gonna recommend to you is to reach out to your local licensing rep for their interpretation of what is expected. Do they want a brand new feeding instruction for each child every 30 days? Or is it okay to just initial if there's no change? So that's why I brought that one up, is this, I've seen different guidance from different reps. All right. Page 101. Page 101 is 2903. How long may the nap or rest time last each day? And you're going to see that it says your sleep or rest period must not exceed 3 hours. The reason why I bring this one up is that if you notice on page 101, 2903, it does not mention a minimum amount of time, all right? The minimum amount of time is going to be contingent on the child and their needs, all right? So it just can't exceed 3 hours, all right? So you kind of get to determine what is the minimum amount of time right there based on the group of children in your care and their needs. I do agree 100% that children need a sleep or rest period, all right? That's very important for our young children. When you get into a pre-K classroom, they're not napping 2 hours and you got chaos, all right? Plus, we need to keep in mind that when that child transitions to public school, they're not going to be napping. So, we probably need to be weaning them off of it. But you do need to have, a small amount of time in there. Page 103. We're almost done. Hang in there, guys. Page 103 is 746, 3001. 3001. May I take children away from my center for field trips? Now, we didn't do any field trips this year in 2020 because of our pandemic. We missed all of our field trips this year. But when we do get back to normal life and we start taking field trips again, there's one thing I want to point out. And this one, again, is a big misunderstood standard. Karen, to answer your question, yes, it should be. Yes, it should be. Number 6 on 3001 says, each child must wear a shirt, name tag, or other identification listing the name of the child care center and the child care center's phone number. So that t-shirt, that name badge, that wristband, whatever it is that you're using should only have your child care center's name and phone number on it, and that's it, all right? The child's name should never be exposed, all right? That is big time stranger danger, all right? You're really placing that child at risk when you're exposing their name out on a field trip. But when I ask programs, because I'll see people at the zoo, and I'm like, hey, why do you have that kid's name, on that shirt? Oh, licensing says we have to. Nope, that's not what it says. Just your program's name and telephone number. But please, don't expose that child's name to the public. That's really placing them at risk. All right. 746-3301. What are the basic requirements for snacks and meal times? All right. C as in cat says a child must not go more than 3 hours without a meal or snack being offered unless the child is sleeping. All right. So what I want y'all to be careful with here is your afternoon snack. And when you're scheduling your breakfast, your lunch, and your afternoon snack, you need to be careful what time you're serving that afternoon snack. So for example, if you're serving that afternoon snack at 2:30, then you need to offer another snack by 5:30. And I know many of you are open until 6:30 in the evening, all right? So there's a 4-hour difference between 2:30 and 6:30. But they cannot go more than 3 hours without a meal or snack being offered. So those kids that are there kind of late, you might want to look into this, all right? Because you might be exceeding that 3 hours without a snack or meal being offered in the afternoon, all right? So wanted to point that one out to you. On page 124, 746-3425, must caregivers wear gloves when handling blood or bodily fluids containing blood? You're going to see here, yes, caregivers must follow universal precautions outlined by the Centers for Disease Control when handling blood, vomit, or other bodily fluids that may contain blood. All right? And that last part is the big part. Other bodily fluids that may contain blood. All right? So, where this is misunderstood is that, when your employees, when your caregivers are changing diapers, or helping a child with a runny nose or something, technically, no, they don't have to wear a glove, every single time they're dealing with a bodily fluid. Gloves are only required when there is blood, vomit, or the bodily fluid may contain blood. All right? That's when the glove is required. Okay? Now, that's what licensing says. My recommendation to you is to make sure that your caregivers are wearing gloves anytime they are dealing with bodily fluid. Because here's my thought on this. Any bodily fluid could contain blood, and it could go undetected. All right? There could be blood and bodily fluid that you don't see with the naked eye. All right? So I think it's a good rule of thumb to wear gloves with any bodily fluid that you're dealing with. But as far as licensing is concerned, it's only required when it's blood, vomit, or the bodily fluid may contain blood. Wanted to point that one out there for you as well. Could you have snack time as, I'm reading some questions here. Could you have snack time as a center rotation in the classroom during center time? Yes, as long as the snack is made available to that child. It's served and made available. Yeah, we do that a lot in our after school programs. We do that and they kind of rotate through. Mainly because of the number of children we're serving, we kind of rotate them through. There you go. I gotta click on see more. So I got a question with the serving of food. What is the standard differences on facilities that serve meals through the food program services, others that don't cook hot meals? Is it the same time limit? Yeah, that standard doesn't change regardless of where your food comes from. That standard does not change. All right. I see someone is saying that your local licensing rep just told you yesterday that with the emergency orders, people need to be wearing gloves basically all the time with diaper changing. And I would have to agree with that too. Yes, under the emergency orders, you are required to be following CDC guidelines. And the CDC guidelines do say to wear a glove when changing diapers. So under the emergency orders, you're absolutely correct. Let's pretend for a moment we're in a normal world, all right? Let's pretend like this is a normal situation and we're not in a pandemic right now. So I'm sharing 746-3425 with you as if we were in a normal situation and not under an executive order. So, but yes, Charity, you are correct. Under our executive order right now, they should be wearing gloves with every bodily fluid. All right? Page 128, 3601, there's two on this page that are big, all right, right here. Now the first one, what types of illness would prohibit a child from attending the child care center? Number one says that the illness prevents the child from participating comfortably in the child care center's activities, including outdoor play. All right, and that's what I want to point out to you right here. Two things in this sentence. The illness prevents the child from participating comfortably and participating in outdoor activities. So if you have that parent that comes in and says, I don't want my kid to go outside today. Well, if they're too sick to go outside, they're too sick to be in your program. All right? And I have given parents a copy of this page a lot. All right? This is not my rule. This is the state of Texas. If your child is too sick to go outside, they're too sick to be in care. All right? So if you don't want them to go outside today, that means you keep them at home. All right? And then the other big part is participating comfortably. You know, sometimes when we're having to exclude children, it's all about the temperature. It's all about the temperature, you know. When I got him home, he didn't have a temperature, or, you know, whatever. We hear that complaint all the time. Forget about the temperature, all right? It's not about the temperature. Your child's not comfortable. All right, whatever sign or symptom he's having, he can't participate comfortably in the program's activities. All right, that's what we've got to focus on. Children that parents come and pick them up to take them to the doctor to receive a shot. They're getting current on their immunizations, and then they want to bring them back. All right. I sometimes have a problem with that because, you know, after that child gets a shot, they're not comfortable, all right? They got a little bit of a pain, and so that might prevent them from participating comfortably in the program's activities. So, you know, be aware of that right there. The other big misunderstanding on this page, and this is my number 2 biggest, most misunderstood item in this book, is number 3. The child has one of the following signs or symptoms: an oral temperature of 101, accompanied by behavioral changes or other signs and symptoms, a ear temperature of 100 or an armpit temperature of 100. All right, so oral, ear, armpit. How many of you, when you take a child's temperature under the arm, you're adding a degree? All right, who told you to do that? Y'all know that there is nothing in writing that says to add a degree when you're taking armpit temperature. That is a myth. All right? And if you are a doctor or a nurse or a medical person, you might say, well, Tim, but there is a 1 degree difference between body temperature and oral temperature. Yeah, you're right. There is a 1 degree difference between body temperature and oral temperature. But if you look on page 128, you know, like A and B, that's why it says an oral temperature of 101, an ear or armpit temperature of 100. They are already taking that 1 degree difference into consideration. Okay? They're already taking that into consideration. So that whole adding a degree thing needs to stop. All right? Because they've already taken that into consideration. So just wanted to point that out. Karen is saying that they require the child to be excluded for 24 hours after they receive a shot because they could have a reaction. I think that's very smart. Very, very smart policy to include in your handbook. I like that one. Gold star, Karen, gold star. All right, I just have 2 more left. 2 more left that I want to talk about. On page 134, 3703, this has been big this year, all right? How can I ensure the safety of the children from other persons? And if you look at A as an apple, people whose behavior and or health status poses an immediate threat or danger to the health and safety of the children must not be present in your building, all right? So you as the leader of the program need to be very attuned to people's health status, both mental and physically, all right, and their behavior. We've talked a lot, you know, over the last couple of years about parent code of conduct. And I actually have that as an upcoming topic for one of my 10 at 10s, parent code of conduct. If you have a parent whose behavior, you know, is at a point where it's posing a threat to the health and safety of the children, they got to go, all right? Or a disgruntled employee, all right? And then the main thing here is the health status. And I want you to think about not just physical, but mental, all right? So if you have an employee that's very upset about something, they're mentally unstable, you know, probably don't need to be there, okay? So, for example, let's say you have an employee that is not meeting an expectation and you have to pull them into the office and you write them up. After you write up an employee, sometimes they're very upset. They're very emotional after, you know, having that difficult conversation. They probably shouldn't be back in the classroom. All right, after you've been written up, you know, your behavior or health status may be a direct threat to the health and safety of the children. So I want y'all to be very attuned to this, be very aware, all right, and make some good decisions that are in the best interest of everyone. All right. I got a question. Let's see, does that have to be a policy to enforce it? Yes, it's always, Denise, it's always a good idea for things to be in writing in order for you to enforce them. So that's always best case scenario for it to be in your policy manual or in some form of writing in order for you to enforce it. All right. you can still do it, but you're probably going to have a lot of pushback. All right, there you go. Can you ask a child to leave because of their behavior? Denise is asking. Absolutely. This is actually in the child care minimum standards. When you look at operating policies in the standards, and where it says that one of your policies, you have to have a policy on suspension and expulsion of children. At the end of that standard, there is a helpful information box. And in that helpful information box, you will read that it says a director still has the right to de-enroll a child when it is in the best interest of the child or the other children in care. So yes, you can do that. All right, and that's actually in the standards. There you go. Very good. And of course, always get signatures on your handbooks, acknowledgments on your handbooks. All right. So I'm just kind of reading a couple more of the comments right here. Yeah, so Erica kind of is validating what I just said. There you go. Last item I want to talk about, that I want to talk about is on page 135, and that is 3705. Am I required to have video or audio monitoring system? So are you required to have cameras in your program? No, it is not a requirement. You can have cameras with audio and video in your program. But, you know, what I really wanted to point out to y'all right here is not so much that it's misunderstood, but I really want y'all to see the helpful information box. That it says, research has shown that many incidents of abuse of children and child care occur when one caregiver is alone with a child and not easily observed from the outside area. Assuring that all children and caregivers are observable at all times greatly reduces the risk to children. Examples of removing barriers that prevent observations include keeping classroom doors open, placing windows in classroom doors, ensuring the presence of a second caregiver within the group, and the use of closed circuit cameras and the use of mirrors. That helpful information box right there that I just read to y'all, I think sums up this entire conversation we've had today. All of these most commonly cited items and most misunderstood items is kind of wrapped up with a big bow right here with this comment. And I have to agree with them. When an adult is left alone with a child or left alone with a group of children, that they are more likely to use poor judgment and not maintain self-control and do something bad to a child. When there is another adult present, or when they know they are being observed, they are less likely to injure a child. So I think this is very big. All right, big information right here. The other thing, you know, that I want to point out right here is that under the helpful information box on page 135, it does say the use of closed circuit cameras. You know, I'm not a big fan of programs that give parents access to your cameras. And you're opening up, you know, that circuit. And even though they have to log in and it's supposed to be secured, there's a lot of opportunities for hackers to get into those camera systems, and you don't know who's watching your kids. And, you know, you have a breakdown in trust, you know, that is very important in our industry. You know, so we like it to be closed circuit. That's what I recommend. But I really wanted to point this out because I think it's a very valuable piece of information that in order to reduce children being injured, that adequate adult supervision is so very important, and they validate it right here on page 135. All right, so there you go. That is our list of most commonly cited standards and most misunderstood standards. So I hope that this was helpful to all of you, and thank you to everyone that stayed with me the entire 2 hours and 45 minutes. The link to complete your worksheet is already posted on Facebook. It automatically posted for me. If you don't see it, just refresh your browser and you'll see it there on your wall. So the link to complete the worksheet should be out there. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And I've got a couple of 10 at 10s next week, so look forward to more Facebook Live events next week. And tomorrow, I will be doing another 3-hour workshop here on Facebook Live, minimum standards for caregivers. So if you have some employees that need some minimum standards training, I will be back here tomorrow from 9 to 12. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Make safe and healthy choices. Remember that the choices you make after hours and on the weekend affect your program, and remind your employees of this. So we need to be making safe and healthy choices at home as well as in our center, so that we can reduce the spread of the virus and hopefully be done with this soon. All right, y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.